My name is Bruno Sade from brunosade.com. Today I want to talk about the term secondary gains. This is a term that is used both in EFT and some psychotherapy models. I believe it first came about in Freudian psychoanalysis. That basically means a subconscious reason to hold on to the problem or issue that the person is trying to resolve, and that acts as an obstacle to actually resolving that problem or issue. Some people talk about it in terms of the upside of keeping the problem or the downside of no longer having the problem. But personally, I'm not really a big fan of the term secondary gains, and I don't really use it when talking to my clients. The reason being is that the term secondary gains can imply that the person doesn't want to get better, or that the person is actively benefiting from their problem or is doing it on purpose. They don't want to get better. And it can sometimes imply some kind of judgment or accusation. Instead, the way that I prefer talking about it, and that I actually and honestly think about it, is like this. If there was a part of you that was afraid something bad might happen as a result of no longer having this problem, what might that bad thing be? In other words, what is this part of you trying to protect you from? And I believe that whatever concerns these parts of us might have are to be taken seriously and are to be heard, listened to, and respected. They are not to be quickly dismissed or judged. Some of these concerns or fears might require some tapping, and other times it might require to come up with creative ways to get every part of us needs met. So both the part of us that wants to no longer have the problem and the part of us that's afraid something bad will happen as a consequence of no longer having the problem. Let's discuss a few examples to make this clearer. Let's say that there's a part of you that's afraid that if you were to no longer have any back pain, you would be forced to say yes to other people's requests a lot more frequently. Because by having the back pain, people are more understanding that you cannot say yes to some of the requests because you have the back pain. So the back pain gives you a graceful way to say no that other people don't get offended with, or they don't try to pressure you, etc. So it's like the back pain is the way that your body or this part of you found to allow you to say no. So this is a very valid concern. One way that you could apply EFT on this if you wanted to is to notice what happens, what thoughts, feelings, sensations come up for you when you imagine the scenario of no longer having the back pain and someone, maybe a family member or a friend, asks you for something or makes the request that you do something that you don't really want to do. And how do you feel about the possibility of saying no to them without it being because of the back pain? If you notice any unpleasant emotions, feelings, or sensations as you imagine this future event, that is something that you can apply EFT on to diminish and or release that unpleasant emotional charge. Let's take another example. Let's say that there's a part of you that is afraid that if you no longer have a fear of public speaking, you would then feel overconfident and you would walk into speaking engagements totally unprepared. Again, this is a valid concern. So the first question is, has this ever happened before? That you went unprepared into a speaking engagement, to some kind of presentation you had to give or oral exam or something like that, and you had to then suffer the consequences of not having prepared enough. If that's the case, that would be a useful memory to tap on to diminish or release the emotional charge around that memory. Or maybe also you can come up with a future event, imagining that you no longer have a fear of public speaking and you have some sort of public speaking engagement coming up and you have to prepare for that. And as you imagine having to do that preparation, do you notice any uncomfortable feelings, sensations, or emotions coming up? And again, that would be a useful future event to tap on to deal with this fear that this part of you might have. Let's think about a third example. Let's say that there's a part of you that's afraid that if you didn't have any physical pain anymore, you would lose your disability benefits and you would stop having what has become a very important source of income in your life. Again, this is a very valid concern, and I think it's nothing to be ashamed of. Maybe that part of you is afraid that you would never be able to find an alternative, less painful source of income? And if that's the case, are there any past or future events connected to that belief that come to mind? If so, those would be good targets to apply EFT on. A very brief example of how you could start a round of tapping working on this could be something like, when I remember that time before this pain ever showed up in my life, when I went to that job interview and it was such a mess. When I think about that now, I feel this sadness in my chest. And this is what I'm noticing right now. This sadness in my chest, this sadness in my chest. That interview was such a mess. This sadness in my chest. That interview was such a mess. This sadness in my chest, this sadness in my chest, this sadness in my chest. And then you reassess as you think about this past event before the pain ever showed up. What do you notice about it now? What aspect of it are you focusing on now? And what feeling, emotion, or sensation do you notice coming up now when thinking about it? Is it still sadness in your chest? Is it something else? And you would then modify your setup statement accordingly for the next rounds. So to recap, secondary gains are nothing to be ashamed of. Rather than thinking of them in terms of any kind of gains, I prefer to think about them as protection mechanisms. A part of you is trying to protect you from something bad that it thinks would happen if you were to no longer have the problem or symptom that you are trying to resolve. The good news is that by listening to these parts' concerns and maybe even tapping on them, you can then soothe them so that you can gain more freedom with regards to how you want to live your life. And lastly, if you would like help implementing any of these tips, or if you suspect that there's a memory that might be too traumatic or intense to work on your own, feel free in that case to enlist the aid of a certified EFT practitioner, such as myself, or even if it feels like this might be too much to do on your own, again, feel free to enlist the aid of a certified EFT practitioner. That's it for today. I hope this was useful, and I look forward to seeing you again in one of my next videos.